you touched upon a theme which I want to move to next, which is about the migrant labor crisis. It's been dominating the headlines, rightly, wrongly, for many weeks now. Um, Slowly ebbing into the background now. But now, rather than touching upon the social angle of that crisis, which is also a real one, and we can hear the views on that also. But my primary focus is now, agriculture. Obviously, the moving back of these large masses of people to their native places, to the rural areas, obviously will have some sort of a short-term impact. Fortunately, the Kharif crop sowing has been very good. The Rabi crop output was, touching record levels. The rains so far have been merciful. Gods have been merciful. So everything augurs well from the rural economy point of view. Now, specifically, this mass movement of people back into the villages. What do you think is likely to? How is it likely to play out in the immediate term?
Okay. See that this movement has actually zero impact. The impact has already happened on the real economy, on the non-agricultural side, because these people have real jobs, and that's all gone. So they're just going back to a place where the government is feeding them for free. That's it. So it has no impact because those who are working at the fields are already working at the fields. In the agricultural sector, there was a problem with migrant labor going back in those states where there was not enough labor, like basically Punjab, Tamil Nadu, possibly parts of Maharashtra. These three states had a labor problem. So the government had to step in to make sure that the harvest happened on time, and they helped them to also to the sowing of the next crop, because they depended heavily on the migrant labor. So on that side, the government has brought in some help to them, and I guess that's kind of addressed and settled. Like I said, all we need is our agriculture to perform at 100% and manufacturing at 33% and services at 67%, and we are at 0% growth. So as long as that target is achieved, and we are fine. So basically, the migrant labor going back has no impact. They have gone back because of the impact. So there's nothing really to worry about. Like I said, they just gone home, they're just eating their food, and they're just sleeping and waiting for the work order to start again so that they go back. And it's already started. I mean, in Gurgaon, Delhi, NCR, factories started for the first week of May. And more than 6 lakh people have come back to work. Out of the more than 11 lakhs who left, more than 50% are back. So, like I said, once there is a consumption push, automatically factories will ramp it up in no time. So there's no real impact at anything. I guess social disturbance is an issue. That's a real issue. Yeah, Vikas.
As Shankarji rightly pointed out, a lot of them are coming back. As jobs come back, a lot of them are coming back. But I would like to think of even the migration as an opportunity in one way. I would hope, and again, I have no data point to support this. It is just plain conjecture or hypothesis or whatever you might say on my fanciful one at that on my behalf. I hope some of the more enterprising ones stay behind and don't come back. And then what will happen is that they will bring some of the enterprise that they have seen, say, in places like Mumbai, or like especially in places like Mumbai, and bring the same enterprise back into the villages, or bring some of the same technologies that they might have seen in places like Mumbai, like digital technologies, and think about newer ways of doing business or things like that. And even if, say, 10% of the enterprising people or 5% of the enterprising people stay behind in wherever they have come from, it will be a boost to the rural economy. And it will, somewhat, we have always said that, jobs are being too concentrated in the cities in India. So hopefully, there might be in the longer term, medium or longer term, there might be a little less stress on this fact. Now, whether this happens or not, I don't know. As I said, this is probably a fanciful conjecture on my part, or rather, it's a fond hope that people going back, staying there, and revamping the economy of the villages or small cities they came from. Like somebody goes back home and starts an online delivery, like a business back home. Maybe uh, that will give a boost to the economy there. So this is my hope from the migration crisis. Whether any of it happens or not, I don't know. But this is really what I think would be an opportunity.
Now, interesting point, because and probably if there are entrepreneurs or venture capitalists listening in, maybe somewhere an idea is bubbling in somebody's head, and maybe there can be a business case to be made. The question that automatically comes to mind is, what is holding us back in this area? I'm not specifically talking about the use case you talked about in terms of rural enterprises, the rural based enterprises, but as a country, as a people, we have gloriously been talking about our past of, Soni Ki Chidiya, where the full potential of the country will one day be realized. And like you, I'm also very hopeful that one day that will come, probably in our living time. But equally, what are some of those things? What are some of your thoughts in terms of what are those blocks? What are those beliefs that seem to be holding us back? It's to do with mental models that we have. It's to do with systems, processes, rules, regulations. What is it? What can be done to sort of get these out of the way and correct them so as to realize our full potential of the country?
Exactly as you put it, it's the mental model. This colonial hangover is still there. And yes, it is rules and regulations. The socialist model does not work. So since 91, we have been in a trend towards capitalism. We're still not 100% capitalist economy. But yes, we have jumped the socialist model in 91. So we can thank Narasimha Rao for that. So why we have not regained? First and foremost, identity. Are you a proud Indian? So this identity politics has been started, rather the base on which the Jansangh and then the BJP has done its politics. So this is still considered bad by the old guard, which is the colonial mindset. Because they still want to divide you as a Marathi, as a Tamilian, as an XYZ. They don't want you as an Indian. Because politics is played on divisions, not on the coming together of people. So to address your things, other than your mental makeup and your rules and regulations, the third and the missing point, key link, is identity. So now we are seeing that this quotient is increasing under this government. And how have they achieved it? They have flipped the narrative, where the earlier narrative was all about never celebrating Indian achievements and actually downgrading them and insulting any or playing up any mistakes made by the establishment. So this government saw the biggest and the most emotive place where they can turn the narrative was with the armed forces. And using the armed forces, whenever the narrative insulted or questioned the armed forces for the activities they did. And please understand, the armed forces don't do anything on their own. They are told to walk into a place and die, they'll just walk into a place and die. They will not ask why. They are told to demolish a structure, they'll just demolish it. They will not ask why. So to put your negative thing on an armed forces is one of the most stupidest arguments that you can give as a colonial mindset guy. So this is the place where the government identified that they can flip the narrative and build the identity. So this one can happily see in the last 5-6 years. has exposed a lot of these so-called inverted column intellectuals, and it is giving a sense of nationalism, Indian identity, not only within India, but even amongst the NRIs outside India. And the very display of this, it's not that we are saying that the others are useless and we are better. It is just that I am proud being an Indian. It immediately resonates with the other person. So the other person says, I am proud to be an American, I am proud to be an Australian, I am proud to be a Japanese, and I'm happy that you're proud to be an Indian. They used to mock. Oh, you are a Marathi, you don't like the Tamilians, no? Or you don't like the Punjabis, no? So now that is gone. So this is how a nation is built. And on this first step, you can build a stronger economy with a proper policy. So again, removing the socialism underlying, going towards capitalism, if we can fast track our reforms and become a 100% capitalist economy, I'm sure within 20 years, that is one generation, we may not be the Sony Ki Chidi of the world, but definitely in a country of 130 crores, if 80 crores today are at risk, we can say possibly less than 10 crores will be at risk in 20 years. And that will be a super achievement for any economy. Yeah, Vikas.
Thanks, Shankarji. I'll take off from the 2 points that Shankarji has made. One was around this socialism versus capitalism, and the other on the identity. And I'll first talk about this socialism a bit. We are a quasi-capitalist economy. We are a economy that supposedly functions on capitalist principles, but by a set of people who have socialist mindsets. And I'm not even talking about the politicians. The politicians only reflect, they are a mirror. They only reflect what people want. If people want freebies, the politicians will give freebies. One thing at least I have learned is not to blame the politicians as much as they are blamed in India. They're doing a difficult job. They are being reflectors. So this capitalist structure and a socialist mindset means that we are neither here nor there. And that has been the problem that has been with us for a very long time. And I think we have learned that socialism does not work. But at the same time, we don't want to jump ship and go across to capitalism, but because we are fearful. But why is this socialist mindset among our people? And I will give you, I think, a quotation from Mr. R.M. Lala's autobiography or biography of JRD, Mr. JRD Tata, of course, the doyen of Indian industrialists. And I think he quotes an exchange between Panditji, our first Prime Minister, Panditji and JRD, in which, JRD apparently tried to make a point that even public sector, enterprises need to make a profit. And Panditji replied in anger, I hate the word profits. And I think that exchange has been quoted. Now, this has permeated into our system, like our freedom fighters, our leaders, the first Prime Minister, that enormous influence, intellectual influence on the people, and that has permeated. He probably had good reasons for it. First was, of course, we were enslaved by a company, not by a country, East India Company. So instinctively, Indians, at least of that era, had a, I would say, aversion towards companies because of East India companies, especially foreign companies. So therefore, we turned inwards just after independence. And then there was a cream of people, who were really Fabian socialists, like Nehruji, people, all of them, most of them who were educated in England, with the possible exceptions of Gandhi and Patel, who went to England and at least did not become Fabian socialists. And Ambedkar was educated in the US, so he was not infected with this Fabian. So I'm sorry, I'm using the word infected, but I'm saying affected, even though it is really infected. But for polite purposes, we have to call it affected. But so and fortunately or unfortunately, the Fabian socialists won over. In the initial 20 years of our existence as an independent nation. So among all the economic models that were floating around, the Fabian socialists won out. Patel died very early. And I personally, again, this is my personal opinion, our biggest tragedy was not Patel dying early. Our biggest tragedy was the sidelining of Rajaji, who was probably the most, I would say, versatile economic thinker among politicians of that era. And I think the Swarajya party or the Swatantrata party that he had made, and whatever he tried to do on the economic front is there for all to see, and people have forgotten him. They don't study him, but I think he deserves greater study. And I think we would have been better off with the Rajaji model then. And I would think Rajaji would have made the best first Prime Minister of India. That is my personal view. And I am not a Tamil. So, so that was the second thing. The third thing, which, and I grant this to Panditji, was the fact that, at that time, Soviet Union had come up extremely fast from being in a complete agricultural country at the turn when the Tsars lost power. And within 20 years, they were the leading industrialized nation in the world. They had defeated, essentially it was the Soviets who defeated Hitler. We might talk about, Eisenhower and all of that, but it was really the Soviets who slammed through through the German defenses and won the war, really. So the prestige of the Soviet model was so high that, inevitably, some of that rubbed off on the Indian thinking. And that is something that I grant Panditji. I think he got too influenced by the Soviet model for good reasons, because Soviet Union was a big winner in the last 20, 30 years at that point of time. And that's the reason why, these are the historical reasons why this socialism took root in India. And the result of that socialism taking root in India was that, money making, as I said, I gave the example of what happened between JRD and Panditji, was that profit making became stigmatized in India. And that is something that reflected in the kind of regulations, the kind of income tax regulations, the kind of labor regulations that have been put in place. And these have become a huge barrier in the so-called ease of doing business. Like, for example, we keep saying, I think Manish Sabarwal of Team Lease keeps talking about this. And I think he's extremely right on this. We are holding back our own entrepreneurs. Some of our entrepreneurs do so well when they go abroad. We are holding them back because of this, largely because of our own mindset, not the politicians, the mindset of the population. So that has to change. So you have to start making heroes out of your entrepreneurs. We have movies based on Mahendra Singh Dhoni. We have movies based on film stars in the South. A lot of them, Savitri, for example, films are made. How many movies are made on entrepreneurs? Even on JRD, no movie has been made, as far as I understand. So I think we have to put entrepreneurs on a pedestal to understand that they do a difficult job. They are the ones who will make India better, because as Franklin Roosevelt said, the best social security is a good paying job. That's the best social security. And the good paying job comes from entrepreneurs. We know public sector cannot do it in the long run because there are lots of pulls and pressures in the public sector. There is no scope for productivity. It's the private sector which will give you a good paying job in the long run. That's the best social security. And this is not an Indian, this is Franklin Roosevelt, who was probably the most left wing of US presidents ever. So that is something we need to understand. We need to teach our children. We need to change our mindsets, and we need to change our economics departments in some of our Indian universities, because this thinking has to permeate there. That's one. The second part, which I will touch upon, and which might touch a raw nerve a little bit, is on the identity, which Shankarji talked about. Why is that important? Because that leads to a lack of confidence that has manifested itself in a lack of confidence in our own people. You talk to any venture capitalist, private equity guy, and they will tell you, has this model been tried out somewhere in the West? Why can't it be tried out first in India? Simply because we don't have the confidence. We need validation for everything, including studying our own history. We would rather depend upon the interpretation of some Western guy in some major fancy Western university, sorry, I'm again using that word, second time I'm doing it, the fancy Western universities then look at the interpretation of an Aurobindo or a Radhakrishnan, you would rather privilege that interpretation. That has gone into our mindset. That has to change. Only then the confidence will happen. And in fact, I'll touch an even bigger raw nerve. Shankarji talked about intellectuals in India. In fact, all of us, and I am including myself in that, we have been taught, intellectuals have been taught to be negative in India. You talk to an American, the guy is positive, confident, talking about what can be done. You talk to a so-called intellectual in India, and we start talking about everything that is wrong. हमारे यहाँ कास्ट है, हमारे यहाँ जेंडर इनइक्वालिटी है. अरे does it, ये caste gender inequality equivalent is there everywhere in the world, but only among Indian intellectuals you will see that the first thing, and as if the most important thing in India is caste and gender inequality. Yes, it is there, maybe more, maybe less, that is a point we can argue separately. But the fact is, when an American child is taught, he's taught about, how America became great in 50 years or 100 years. He's not taught that the Americans destroyed the natives, completely did a genocide of natives. They kept, a slave system for 200 years and profit. That is not the first thing they are taught. But look what is taught to an Indian child. Caste system. How much, gender inequality existed. Obviously, you will have a negative mindset. I'm not saying they did not exist, but I am saying, can you balance that with some of our achievements that we had? We had great philosophy, we had great science, we had great administrators. None of it is taught. We are told that 18th century was anarchy, and that is something that has been popularized by, William Dalrymple, that it was anarchy. During that period of anarchy, we had Ahilyabai Holkar, perhaps one of the greatest rulers India has seen. She was a woman. Do we even celebrate her? How many of our children even know who Ahilyabai Holkar was? She was perhaps one of the greatest rulers this country has seen.
Only those who go to Indore by air know who she is.
Yes. And, if you go to Kashi or, like to Banaras and bathe on the ghats, all the ghats have been repaired and made by Ahilyabai Holkar. So, we don't know that. So there is, no confidence. And I would say, we as intellectuals or whosoever calls themselves Indian intellectuals have to get out of this negative mindset. And I will quote Dr. Kapil Kapoor. He's one of my favorite Indian academicians. He's the doyen of ancient Indian intellectual studies. He has studied intellectual systems of ancient India. And he had one word for Indian intellectuals. They are rudalis. He used the word, they are rudalis. They are mourning all the time. Something or the other they have to mourn. Talk about arranged marriage, that Netflix series that is coming on, whole series of articles on caste. अरे भैया, arranged marriage में कुछ भी नहीं अच्छा है क्या? Arranged marriage makes sure that average people get married. Otherwise, how many people can get married on their own? That's the biggest advantage of arranged marriage. But I was lucky I met my wife. Otherwise, I would have needed an arranged marriage. So it is entirely her, she has done me the honor of marrying me. Otherwise, I would have had to depend on arranged marriage. So, that is, that is what I call the Rudali mindset. Let's get out of this Rudali mindset. Yes, there are many things bad in India, but there are a lot of things good. When shall we start focusing on good? That is when confidence will come in. That is when I can go and tell the private equity guy, yeah, मैं कर रहा हूँ, कभी किसी ने नहीं किया है, पर मैं करके दिखाऊंगा ना. Which is why I like Mukesh Ambani for whatever it is worth. The guy says, I don't care if anybody has done it or not, I am going to do it.
Absolutely.
And that is a mindset that we need more. Or even R&T, Mr. R.N. Tata. I remember, I cannot provide proof of this. But he said in a meeting that, I want my brand to be on Piccadilly Circus. That is the kind of confidence you should have. Piccadilly Circus in UK, that, Tata Group should be a major brand in the UK. That is the kind of confidence, that is the kind of, we require among us. So first, we have to celebrate our entrepreneurs. And second, we have to celebrate ourselves. And on the second point, celebrating ourselves, we have to, like somehow start ignoring our intellectuals. And start believing more in people who do. I am also a person who reads, writes, thinks. I think people like us are less important to this country than people who do. And we should start celebrating them. That's from my side.
Very well articulated. Thank you so much, because on 2 points, I just want to make a quick comment. One is, I'm very thankful for arranged marriages. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got married at all. Nobody would have married me, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
On Tata, I often fly to, at least until the pandemic, I used to fly often to the UK for various purposes, private as well as for work-related stuff. The Heathrow Express is painted with Tata all over.
Yes.
All over. I'm sure you all know it.
Yes.
You just see Tata when you land in London Heathrow, everywhere. I mean, without an exception. I also saw some London buses painted with Tata, with their beautiful symbol, the emblem that they have. Really, very, very well achieved, I must say. I don't know about Piccadilly Circus, but I'm sure it's there all over the place, and it's a very well-known brand, and they have achieved it, and we should be proud of it.
Absolutely.
Right.
That is why I named Mukesh Ambani and R&T. They think big. They're not constrained.
Yes. And last time I really got excited about, I think it was in Spain somewhere, and I don't remember the name of the bus service. It was there, and it's a brand of a bus, and just underneath that it said Mahindra, a Mahindra Group company, or something like that. So you feel really nice. So good to see these things. Tata, Mahindra, whatever. I mean, our own brand, and you associate yourself, your country, with that. And in fact, I had another tourist with me, and I said, "That's my country." I come from India, and you feel very proud about it. Correct. So let's move on.